Application forms for sharing accommodations must be completed 2 months in advance.
Application forms submitted must be submitted in the 2 month advance. Thank you very much. Just my checking. Hello, my name is Pramod and I am giving this test for practice and I am very happy to give this test today. Thank you. But on May 3rd, a couple of weeks later, Lincoln issued an executive order calling for 43,000 three-year volunteers for the Army and also increasing the size of the regular Army and Navy by 40,000 men. Both of these actions were in apparent violation of the Constitution. But on May 3rd, a couple of weeks later, Lincoln issued an executive order. But on May 3rd, a couple of weeks later, Lincoln issued an executive order calling for 43,000 three-year volunteers for the Army and also increasing the size of the regular Army and Navy by 43,000 men. Both of these actions were in apparent violation of the Constitution. In 2005, donor countries agreed on an accord to harmonize their practices. Since then, aid officials have complained that too little has changed on the ground. Conferences of donors in developing countries still tend to be dominated by a small group of North European governments, with the US often absent. Australia has one of the world's most important mining industries. It is a major exporter of coal, iron ore, gold and copper, and is self-sufficient in all minerals bar petroleum. Since the first discoveries, the coal in 1798, mineral production has risen every year. In the decade to 1992, it doubled. It was found that while many companies express interest in Jagbon's use case approach, the actual scenario uses often falls outside what is described in textbooks and standard methodologies. Users therefore face significant scenario management problems. not yet addressed adequately in theory or practice, and are demanding solutions to these problems. The current measure has remained virtually unchanged over the past 30 years, yet during that time there have been marked changes in the nation's economy and society and in public policies that have affected families' economic well-being, which is not reflected in the measure. This report, the research gives an overview of the current situation. The latest scientific evidence on the nature and strength of the links between diet and chronic diseases is examined and discussed in detail in the following sections of this report. This section gives an overview of the current situation and trends in chronic diseases at the global level. We all know about bacteria, viruses, and microscopic protozoa. We can watch the way that these tiny agents move into our bodies and damage our organs. We have a growing understanding of how our body mounts defensive strategies that fight off these invaders and have built some clever chemical that can help mount an assault on these biovillains.
The puppets perform comedy routines, and there is some terrific formation dancing.
The puppet reflects augmented farming, and there were some forms were dancing. Thank you very much.
The health center is situated at the corner of the university behind the library.
The health center situated at the corner of university behind the library.
The university supplies a number of scholarships for those who have specific goals.
The university supplies a number of scholarships to those who have specific goals.
Being a vegan means not consuming any animal products.
Being a vegan means not consuming animal products.
If you want to receive the reimbursement, you must submit the original receipts.
If you want to submit the reassignment, you must need to submit the original receipt.
Those students have to retake the module if their marks are too low.
Those students need to retake the module if their marks are too low.
The course comprises 20 hours of lectures, seminars, and tutorials each week.
The course comprises of 2 hours of lectures, seminars and course each week.
If you need help, I can give you a hand in finding a flat.
If you need help, I can give you a hand in finding a flat.
All course materials will be posted online.
All course materials will be posted online.
Globalization problems require global solutions.
Globalization problems require global solution.
Please be careful when using internet sources.
Please be careful when using internet sources. The image gives information about income. The primary feature of the image is age. Firstly, it shows data about gender and UK. Furthermore, it conveys information about male and female. Moreover, it compares between age 30 to 34. The highest element is 30,000 and lowest element is 5,000. To conclude, the picture is about median income. The image gives information about income. The primary feature of the image is age. Firstly, it shows data about gender and UK. Furthermore, it conveys information about male and female. Moreover, it compares between age 30 and 34. The highest element is 30,000 and the lowest element is 5,000. To conclude, the picture is about median income. The image gives information about rankings. The primary feature of the image is global cities. Firstly, it shows data about highest cost and living. Furthermore, it conveys information about 2008 and 2007. Moreover, furthermore, in Moscow and Russia and Japan. Moreover, it compares between 2008 and the highest. The image gives information about rankings. The primary feature of the image is global cities. Firstly, it shows data about highest cost and living. Furthermore, it conveys information about Russia and Japan. Moreover, it compares between 2008 and 2007. The highest element is 10 and the lowest element is 1. To conclude, the picture is about South Korea. The image gives information about ice. The primary feature of the image is 100% safe. Firstly, it shows data about motorcycle and car. Furthermore, it conveys information about minimum ice thickness and guidelines. Moreover, it compares between 4 inch and 5.7 inch. The image gives information about ice. The primary feature of the image is 100% safe. Firstly, it shows data about motorcycle and car. Furthermore, it conveys information about ice thickness and guidelines. Moreover, it compares between 4 inch and 5 to 7 inch. The highest element is 15 inch and the lowest element is 4 inch. To conclude, the picture is about ice.
Wilson came then from a different world, and he became the focal point of a broad mainstream American culture that thought that modern literature and wanted modern literature to be able to be read and appreciated by ordinary people. They were not modernists in an abstract sense, and certainly some of them, like T.S. Eliot and Faulkner, were too difficult for some of their writings to be read by ordinary people. But this was a world before the division between the brows or between elite or whatever had established itself as part of our consciousness. Wilson was a major player in the successful effort of his generation to establish at the heart of American life an innovative literature that would equal the great cultures of Europe. And he knew that the great cultures of Europe were there. He was not a product of a narrow American studies kind of training at all. He joined a high artistic standard with an openness to all experience and a belief that literature was as much a part of life for everyone as conversation. He thought that Proust and Joyce and Yeats and Eliot could and should be read by ordinary Americans and helped that to happen. Wilson was a very various man. Over a period of almost 50 years, he was a literary journalist, an investigative reporter, a brilliant memoirist, and dedicated journal keeper.
World was the main topic of the lecture. Firstly, the speaker told about focal point of American culture. He further discussed about literature readable by ordinary people. Furthermore, he explained about division between Eliot. Furthermore, he highlighted information about heart of American life. Moreover, he presented information about great culture of Europe. Towards the end, the speaker provided details about experience and belief. In conclusion, the speaker focused on ordinary Americans.
What clothing do people wear, such as students or nurses, to show that they belong to the same organizations?
Uniform, dress, uniform.
If you are celebrating a biannual activity, how many years ago did you celebrate it last time?
2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 2 years ago.
If an event happens annually, how often does it happen?
Every year, each year, every year, each year.
What do you call the people who visit sightseeing locations?
Tourist, trekker, tourist visitors, hikers.
What is the opposite of the word public?
Private, private, public, private.
What are the external organs used for hearing?
Ear, ears, ears, ear, ear.
Honeybees do a waggle dance to direct other bees to sources of nectar. But dancing bees like this one can be halted by a headbutt from another bee. Now researchers have found that this headbutt is actually a warning signal. A feeding station was set up in the lab to mimic a source of nectar. Then foraging bees were introduced to dangers at the station, such as competition from rival colonies. When foragers returned to the hive, they stopped bees dancing. Scientists think the behavior warns dancers of a dangerous source of nectar.
Readjusting to life in your own country after living abroad for some time is a little like recovering from jet lag after a long flight across several time zones. It takes time. And research indicates that after 9 years of living in a foreign country, you never really do readjust. Of course, things have changed. Governments have come and gone. What you knew as countryside has become a suburb. New technologies have changed the way people go about their daily lives, and so on. These changes may well have been taking place in your adopted country, but they were happening while you were there, so you could adapt as you went along. Those are not the main difficulties, however. It is in the smaller, everyday things that you might experience what is known as culture shock, although it's not really a shock, but puzzling all the same. For example, the precise way to behave at a supermarket checkout may have changed. And in ordinary conversation, the frames of reference have changed. And quite often you find that you don't really know what people are talking about, even though they are speaking your native tongue.
What is nanotechnology? Well, a report that was put together by a combination of the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering that came out last summer identifies 2 topics. Nanoscience is the study of a phenomena in the manipulation of materials at atomic, molecular, and macromolecular scales, where properties differ significantly from those at a larger scale. Nanotechnologies are the design, characterization, production, and application of structures, devices, and systems by controlling shape and size at the nanometer scale. So I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what a nanometer is. But loosely speaking, people think of nanotechnologies as being a sort of 100 nanometers or less.
Is that person really glad to see me? Or are they just being polite? Some people struggle to distinguish a fake grin from a truly happy smile. And computers have found this task even more difficult, that is, until researchers develop a program to detect when a smile is genuine. Visual computing researchers at the University of Bradford in the UK started with software for simulating a changing facial expression. This program can examine a video clip of a human head and identify specific details around the eyes, cheeks and mouth. Then the program tracks the details moving relative to each other as the face smiles. Next, the scientists had their program analyzing 2 sets of video clips. In one, subjects performed posed smiles. Global warming might seem like a botanical boon. After all, milder temperatures and more carbon dioxide and nitrogen should feed flora. But a 10-year study has found that any initial positive effect on plant growth from climate change may soon disappear. The report is in the journal Nature Climate Change. Researchers transplanted vegetation from 4 grassland ecosystems to lower, warmer elevations. They also modified the precipitation at the transplant sites based on altered rainfall estimates. For the first year, the plants did great, producing more biomass and churning out more oxygen for us. But their productivity went down for the rest of the decade. What happened? Warming did speed up the nitrogen cycle, which should have increased nitrogen's availability as plant fertilizer. But a lot of the nitrogen left the soil through runoff or uptake into the atmosphere. In addition, productive native plants began to lose out to species that thrive at higher temperatures, but are less productive than the natives. Warmer temperatures may spur immediate growth, but in the long term, we can't expect plants to like it hot.
To reach some kind of understanding of a period in the past, the Middle Ages say, requires a creative act of the imagination, not unlike that of a novelist getting inside the skins of their characters or establishing the environment they live in. What must it have been like to be a peasant under a feudal baron? What might his beliefs and politics have been? Did he, for example, think his situation was simply part of the natural order of things, or that it was grossly unfair and needed to be overthrown? So you have to imagine the terms under which life was lived in those days, and learn to feel in a different way about things by putting yourself into a world very different from your own. Now, of course, every age views the past from its own present, and an 18th century historian's concept of the Middle Ages will be very different from that of one from the 21st century, which is why each age has to write its history over again. It's not so much that more facts or evidence come to light, if they do, but that sensibilities change too.
Both the rotation of the Moon and its revolution around Earth takes 27 days, 7 hours, and 43 minutes to be exact. Because of this motion, the Moon appears to move about 13 degrees against the stars each day, or about half of a degree per hour. If you watch the Moon over the course of several hours one night, you will notice that its position among the stars will change by a few degrees. The changing position of the Moon with respect to the Sun leads to lunar phases.
China, which has both enjoyed sustained economic growth, face worrying challenges. There are worrying indications that social progress is starting to lag behind economic performance, with the slowdown in the rate of reduction in child deaths a special concern. The UN notes that China spends 5% of its GDP on health, but public spending now amounts to less than 2% of GDP. The erosion of public funding, it says, has resulted in a mismatch between need and provision, with per capita spending in urban areas 3.5 times that in rural areas. Between 70 and 80% of the rural population have no health insurance. Children living in the poorest parts of rural China face far greater health risks, and the gap is
Earlier this year, I was driving through the countryside with a girl of 6, and she pointed out some flowers by the wayside. I asked her what she thought flowers were for. She gave a very thoughtful answer. 2 things, she said, to make the world pretty and to help the bees make honey for us. I thought that this was a very nice answer, and I was very sorry to have to tell her that this wasn't. What's an article? I was asking myself this very question in the post office yesterday, standing in line waiting to sign for, as it so happens, an article. A postal article. Not the postal article. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, an article in English is a word that precedes a noun, and simply indicates specificity. This sounds quite complicated, and to be honest, it's quite complicated to say without spraying everyone within 15 feet, but the concept's quite simple. The definite article in English is the word, the, and indicates a specific thing or type. For example, the train is an hour late. By contrast, the indefinite article in English is any of the words, a, an, or, some, and the indefinite article indicates a non-specific thing. For example, would you please pass me an apple? We always precede a word with, a, if it doesn't start with a vowel sound. For example, take a hike. I'm spending a weekend at Bernie's, or there's a knight in shining armor. Similarly, we precede words with the indefinite article, an, if they do start with a vowel sound, for example, an ostrich, an enormous mess, or an occupational health and safety policy.
Height is correlated with a lot of things. Up to a certain height, taller people make more money than the vertically challenged, and the taller presidential candidate almost always wins. Now a study finds that your height as an adult has a profound effect on your perception of your health. Short people judge their health to be worse than average or tall people judge theirs. The research was published in the journal Clinical Endocrinology. Data for the study came from the 2003 Health Survey for England. More than 14,000 participants filled out questionnaires and had their heights measured. The study only looked at how good the subject thought his or her health was, not their actual health. Questions focused on 5 areas: mobility, self-care, normal activities, pain or discomfort, and anxiety or depression. Men shorter than about 5'4" and women shorter than 5 feet reported the worst impressions, but small increases in height at the low end had much bigger effects on perception than the same increases among taller people. Other studies have shown, ironically, that shorter people on average actually live longer.
Three years ago, genome pioneer Craig Venter sailed the Sargasso Sea and returned with 1,800 species of microbes, including 150 never before seen. An impressive haul, but last week scientists in New York announced that if you want to discover new and interesting bugs, you need travel no further than your own forearm. The researchers at the NYU School of Medicine identified 182 species of bacteria, including a dozen new ones, in swabs taken from the arms of 6 healthy volunteers. Their study marks the first full-scale expedition to catalog the biota that calls the human epidermis its home. The microbes that live in and on our bodies outnumber our own cells 10 to 1, so they're an important part of our personal ecology. And it turns out the zoo of bacteria on one person's skin is very different from the zoo on someone else's. Almost 3/4 of the species identified were unique to an individual, and only 4 species were found on all 6 subjects. For the record, the researchers took their samples from the subjects' forearms because that way no one had to undress. So who knows what exotic life forms may be waiting for discovery just behind your knees.
The course places considerable emphasis on critical thinking skills.
You will acquire many skills during your academic studies.
A world-renowned expert of financial management will give a guest lecture.
You do not need to have specialist knowledge to enjoy this book.